Greatness and insignificance, light and shadow, good and evil. The story is full of contrasts. It never ceases to amaze the ability of reformers to change the course of history or, on the contrary, to shake its foundations. The creation of the new is always associated with the destruction of the old, and only time allows us to establish the line between the greatness and insignificance of the reforms carried out. In the world of reformers who have risen to the pinnacle of fame and greatness, there is always their antithesis, reformers whose ideas and actions led to misery and destruction. But the names of both will forever remain in the memory of mankind, reminding us of the weight of every step we take towards changing the world. We will continue our journey and make stops at the great names of history. The pharaoh is a reformer, a seer, a guest from the past or alien. The personality of the mysterious ruler of Egypt, the husband of the beautiful Nefertiti, is surrounded by many fantastic rumors. If we cut off the most unbelievable, what remains is the story of a man who went against thousand-year-old traditions, in politics, religion and art. He rejected all canons, rejected all gods except one, and ruled Egypt together with a mysterious woman. He claimed that there was only one god, Aten, the deity of the solar disk. In his honor he took a new name and moved from Thebes to the city of Akhet-Aten, which he founded. A new artistic style in art was developed. The concept of Amarna art came into use. Painting and sculpture became more lively and realistic, which can be seen in the portrait images of the royal family. Akhenaten laid the foundation for the future Abrahamic religions Judaism, Christianity and Islam, whose doctrine is centered on the worship of one God. Sigmund Freud argued that the Jewish prophet Moses could have been a priest of the cult of Aten. After Akhenaten's death, he was forced to flee Egypt and founded the monotheistic religion of Judaism. Akhenaten remains one of the most mysterious figures in world history. One can only guess what guided him when he conducted the world's first religious revolution. After all, it was not the mythical spirit of the sun that was deified, but the material solar body, which is really the source of vital energy. But this forerunner of the future great monotheistic systems turned out to be too premature. There were few objective factors stimulating radical ideological changes.
The religious reform carried out on the initiative of the Grand Prince of Kiev Vladimir became the most ambitious in the history of Russia, fateful and determined the spiritual direction of the society's life for a millennium to come. The adoption of Christianity in Russia is due to a number of reasons. There were already Christians in the prince's family. His grandmother is Princess Olga. He was interested in a strategic alliance with Byzantium. Paganism led to the isolation of Russia from the Christian world of Europe, hindered the development of international relations and trade. The second important reform of Prince Vladimir was the unification of Russian lands. All the lands of the Eastern Slavs were united as part of Kievan Rus. Its own coin was issued. It was supposed to confirm the dominance of the ruling dynasty. Vladimir turned out to be the true organizer of the Russian land, the creator of Russian civilization, the first creator of the greatness that had stood for 1,000 years. Imagine, the 16th century, Europe. The Catholic Church is the only force that determines how people should live and believe. But one man dared to challenge this system. Martin Luther, a simple monk, was outraged by the sale of indulgences. He believed that salvation is a gift of God, not a commodity that can be bought. Luther wrote 95 theses in which he expressed his thoughts on the Catholic Church and its practices. This bold step led to the beginning of the Reformation, which marked the beginning of Protestantism. Martin Luther became one of the leaders of this movement and created a new doctrine based on faith, the Bible, and a personal connection with God. He translated the Bible into German so that everyone could read it for themselves. Martin Luther is a symbol of freedom of conscience and the struggle for truth. His contribution to history is enormous, and his teaching about love for God and neighbor lives on to this day. Peter I, the great reformer, the last Russian Tsar and the first emperor, left a huge mark in the history of Russia, changing its face forever. He carried out large-scale reforms in the army, education, administrative system and economy. The navy was created, and access to the Baltic Sea was regained. The founded city of St. Petersburg became the new capital of the Russian state. A new body of state administration was created, the Senate. New educational institutions were opened, the civil alphabet was adopted, and the Academy of Sciences was founded. However, the emperor showed himself to be a ruthless and cruel ruler. European traditions were supplanted by Russians, which greatly influenced the centuries-old culture. Peter I left behind not only great achievements, but also complex questions and contradictions. But it cannot be denied that he was and remains one of the brightest and most significant historical leaders of Russia. The era of Nikita Khrushchev is a turning point in the history of the Soviet Union, which made significant changes in the socio-political life of the country. His actions and hasty reforms led to serious economic and political problems, to severe consequences, including environmental disaster and famine. The Soviet Union faced crises in agriculture, problems in the defense industry, ideological splits and conflicts with other countries. The critical moment was the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, when the world was on the brink of nuclear war. The current problems with Crimea have their roots in that era. Khrushchev's domestic policy, accompanied by repression and the growth of the cult of personality, shook Soviet ideology. In 1964, he was removed from power, but his reforms, decisions, and actions played a role in the long-term consequences that led to the collapse of the powerful state. Perestroika is the main brainchild of Mikhail Gorbachev, a controversial era that included glasnost, the formation of organized crime, the policy of disarmament, and the first national conflicts. During the 6 years of his rule, the country went from a superpower to complete collapse. Historians are still arguing about the role of the first and last president of the USSR in these events. Some believe that he sincerely wanted to reform the USSR and became a victim of his entourage, others suggest that he betrayed for the collapse of the state. The truth is that if Stalin got a country with a plan and left it as a superpower with an atomic bomb, then Gorbachev got a superpower and left it as a beggar to the West and the United States. Gorbachev is undoubtedly the #1 traitor not only in Soviet, but in all of Russian history. Since the Soviet Union was the most powerful structure in the entire Russian history, a superstructure, then betrayal here is a super betrayal. It is difficult to find a more dynamic and at the same time dramatic period in recent history. It was during the Yeltsin era and with his direct participation that events took place, each of which radically turned the history of our country upside down. The collapse of the USSR and the creation of the SIS, the abolition of the CPSU, the KGB, the nomenclature state apparatus and the creation of a liberal government. Privatization unfolded and a revolutionary change of ownership took place, from state to private. This process was accompanied by the shooting of the parliament and the dispersal of the Supreme Soviet, unprecedented in world history. The privatization of Russian subsoil in a matter of years gives birth to a family of oligarchs, whose capitals amaze the imagination of even Western billionaires. And at the heart of everything that is happening is not concern for state interests, but a maniacal struggle for power. Yeltsin occupies an honorable second place in the pantheon of traitors to Russia.